What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. And the Seattle Seahawks are going to give us a little bit of breaking news here today because they're not done. They're not going to be quiet yet. They're not going to just lay down, hunker down, and wait for the draft to get here. No, they're actually going to give us some stuff to sink our teeth into because they've gone and made a move about, I don't know, an hour ago. They made a signing. They made a signing not of an offensive lineman like a lot of people may have been expecting and anticipating, but they have signed a wide receiver slash kick returner. And that kick returner aspect may be the most interesting part of this signing, but Laviska Shenault, a guy who I've actually spoken about before, a guy who I actually remember talking about in the draft a few years ago, and a guy who is interesting. Definitely an interesting signing, even if he ends up not making the team. I do think it's notable that they're choosing this particular path. And he brings some unique talents and abilities to the table here that are, I'm not going to say that they're earth shattering, but they do maybe tell us a little bit about the priorities of this team and the thought process of this team as we head towards the draft and then the dog days of the offseason and then the actual mini camps, off-season workouts, etc. So, Laviska Shenault Jr., I remember him a little bit at Colorado, where he played his college football, and then I remember him playing a couple years for the Jaguars, and then a couple years for the Panthers. So let's run it down here real quick. Looking at his pro career, he started out in Jacksonville and actually got off to a pretty decent start, right? Like you look at these numbers, you look at this performance, and you're like, okay, he's heading in the right direction. We've got something here. First couple years, caught about 60 passes per year, 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns. Also did some stuff as a rusher. Also got some carries. Over his Jacksonville tenure, 2 years, he had 29 carries. That's almost, actually, yeah, pretty much won a game. So they were using him in that gadget player role. They were using him on misdirection plays and trick plays. They were finding ways to get him the ball. So it seemed like things were off to a pretty good start. And then he found himself in Carolina. And I can't remember if he was cut or if he was traded for a very, very small return. But Jacksonville basically just gave him away. And I don't really know what prompted that decision because when you look at it, the performance is okay. He did get targeted a lot in 2021. Granted, he had 100 targets to get those 63 catches, but the performance was not bad. This is not a player that you're necessarily going to give up on. So I don't really know what happened. But it looks like they were right to do so because since going to Carolina, he's been a complete non-factor. He's caught almost all of his targets in Carolina. I'll say that, 42 out of 37. But when you only get targeted 42 times in 2 years, you're doing something wrong, especially as a former second-round pick. That's the thing that needs to be remembered here. Shenault is a former second-round pick, so there were high expectations, and he was basically a afterthought in Carolina. He was actually maybe even more of a notable weapon as a runner, where he actually did continue to get work as a gadget player, getting carries and end-arounds and things like that, than he was as a receiver. So now he's here. He's coming off a season where he had all of 115 yards from scrimmage and no touchdowns and 10 catches. So his stock is pretty low right now. He's kind of slowly worked his way down the ladder to where he is now. I don't know what the contract is yet, but I assume it's veteran minimum or something very similar to that. There's no reason why this guy would be worth much more than veteran minimum when you look at what he's done lately. So I'm assuming it's something like that. Now, you go down to his kick returning. It's not a lot, but the last 2 years he has been a kick returner. Only 9 returns, but we have to remember that there aren't that many kick returns in the modern NFL anymore because, quite frankly, they're trying to get rid of those. They were trying to get rid of those kickoffs until very recently. And you can see that on his limited number of kickoff returns, he was doing fairly well. Nothing over the top, but he was offering some plus play as a return man. And with the rules changing this offseason, who knows what he might be able to bring to the table. He might be able to become one of those big-time return guys. You go back and look at this guy's scouting reports. You go back and look at the way this guy played in college when he came out in 2020. He does have some explosion. He does have a nice third gear. He does have the ability to really hit the hole and burst through and just be gone. So maybe that's how we're looking at him. You might be able to say, in fact, that Shenault and Eskridge are competing for a roster spot. And both those guys are going to be looked at in the same way. Low-level receivers who might be able to offer some plus play at kick returns, which is more important now. And whoever looks like they're going to be able to do that the best during this offseason is going to be the guy who gets the nod. So I give Shenault a pretty decent chance of making this team. It's not something I would bet on super confidently, but if the guy he's working to beat out is Eskridge, then you got to give him a pretty good chance of being able to outdo that. You can go back and look at what he did at Colorado. It's pretty good. He never really had a quarterback, still had a 1,000-yard season in 9 games in 2018. 2019 dipped a little bit in production. May have been a first-round pick if he didn't have this production dip in 2019. Was also a relatively prolific player as a rusher. Had 42 carries in 27 games. So it's a big part of his game to get those end-arounds. And there was a little bit of stuff going on with the kick returns. He had 1 in his career. He also had a punt return despite not actually having an official return. So somebody who's more in tune with the nuances of college football scorekeeping is going to have to explain this one to me. He's got 0 punt returns, but he's got 55 return yards and 1 return touchdown. Yeah, somebody's going to have to make that make sense. But that's really all I can say about Shenault. He's a little bit bigger than the average receiver. One thing I would say after this signing is that I've already seen some people start to circle the wagons around this idea of, oh, well, this means we're getting rid of DK Metcalf now. We're going to trade DK Metcalf. I mean, I don't think I should have to sit here and explain why acquiring somebody like Shenault, who has all of 10 catches in the most recent NFL season, doesn't say anything about a guy like a DK Metcalf. But if you're somebody out there who's thinking that this is some sort of predictor of a future DK Metcalf trade, then I'm going to try to tell you right now that I sincerely doubt you're going to see anything like that. If you're going to move off of DK Metcalf, it's not really going to have anything to do with having a guy like Shenault on your team. It is notable that he is bigger than the average receiver and can do some of the things and bring some of the things to the table that DK does, but I would not read into that too much. If there was anything to read into on the higher level of this team, the depth chart, I'd look at Lockett. And I don't think Lockett's going anywhere because he just made a pretty big restructure, but I would sooner believe that Lockett could be moved than DK could be moved, and Shenault's pickup has something to do with that. That's at least feasible to me. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. More running back stuff later. Streaming with the Hawks Nest tonight. Let me know what you think about this signing. I don't have contract details yet, so we don't have the full picture, but how could it be much more than veteran minimum? This guy should be lucky to be in the NFL right now. He's 25 years old, and he's been on a downward spiral the last couple years. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks, and more videos coming.